At the top of this list for me of the things that we are dealing with, it is the decimation of the middle class, the subjugation of the working class, among many, many other things. Race wars, culture wars, gender wars, all of this stuff, in my opinion, is meant to keep us apart in order to keep us from uniting. I think it is extremely important to identify how we got here and name and identify the policies that got us here, because one of the things that is driving me insane is this fracturing of the populace and the infighting that happens between the bottom 90%, which benefits the corporate oligarchy, because we are not really paying attention to the root of all of the problems, which is them. I am telling you guys, it is important to link to this. This document, the Powell Memorandum, was the godfather of all of the right-wing policies that have brought us to this point. The first time, 1973. Now, this is where your ears should start pricking up. The conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, is established, reportedly prompted by the memo's call for new institutions to advance conservative policies. The Pacific Legal Foundation, the PLF, one of the first conservative public interest law firms. Have you guys heard of the Unscrew America tour? I'm not going to talk about them specifically, but I do want to talk about the concept. Also, I really dislike using euphemisms like that. I prefer to speak plainly, but we all know how the algorithms are, so I don't want this to get flagged, and I want this to reach people. So the Unscrew America tour originally was supposed to be to combat Turning Point USA and their propaganda, right? So I am not going to be talking about them specifically, but the concept, I think, is extremely important. And the main thing, the main message that I have regarding this is, before you can unscrew something, you have to find out how it got screwed up in the first place in order to be able to effectively dismantle it. My name is Lisa. I am starting this YouTube channel. We are the Third Estate. More on that later as to why I chose that name, but just for this particular video, my intro video, I wanted to talk about the seed of the reason why, in my opinion, we have inevitably gone down this path as a country, and why we are here now dealing with the things that we are dealing with. At the top of this list for me of the things that we are dealing with, it is the decimation of the middle class, the subjugation of the working class, among many, many other things. I have been seeing this interconnected big picture for a long time, and it has been becoming more and more clear as I get older, and the more we go down this road, and especially with this administration, the things that are coming up to the surface for all of us that people are finally paying attention to. At this point, I am overjoyed that many people are having this conversation now, because I've been talking about this for a long time, and for a while, people were looking at me like I had 5 heads. But we all know that the corporate oligarchy has seized control of every single industry, and that to me is the seed from which all of these wonderful blessings flow of what we are going through as a society, as the bottom 90%. Of course, their main objective is control and power and eating up all the resources and remaining at the top. I think it is extremely important to identify how we got here and name and identify the policies that got us here, because one of the things that is driving me insane is this fracturing of the populace and the infighting that happens between the bottom 90%, which benefits the corporate oligarchy, because we are not really paying attention to the root of all of the problems, which is them. Race wars, culture wars, gender wars, all of this stuff, in my opinion, is meant to keep us apart in order to keep us from uniting. I mean, you see how corporations are always running scared the second a group starts to unionize. That should tell you everything right there. I am a huge proponent of connecting the dots, and the big picture that I see of how we started embarking down this road to become captured by corporatism, and this includes the American government, Congress as well. Personally, I think the ramp up started with the Nixon administration, then was put on steroids with the Reagan administration. Again, there's going to be way more on that later. But as far as my knowledge goes, so far, I credit the reason why we are here and the flashpoint that created the circumstances in order for corporate America to flourish as it did and to take over as it did was the Powell Memorandum. Okay, we're going to talk about this mofo right here. Lewis F. Powell. He became a Supreme Court justice. He was appointed by Nixon in 1971. The Powell Memo is a 1971 confidential memo written by Lewis F. Powell, Jr., a corporate lawyer who later became a Supreme Court justice. The memo was titled Attack on American Free Enterprise System. It outlined strategy for businesses to defend their interests against a perceived broad attack by advocating for increased corporate influence in politics and public discourse. The memo is seen as a blueprint for conservative and corporate political movements that called for building think tanks, influencing media, and engaging in legal and political activism. The purpose: to identify and suggest strategies for combating what Powell saw as a broad attack on the free enterprise system, which he believed was being undermined by... that part got cut off, but you could read it. Lewis F. Powell Jr. believed that the corporate class was being undermined by anti-business forces. Now, this is very critical to me because I think the 60s, the 1960s, civil rights movements, the success that progressivism was gaining, and all of the incredible milestones that they reached scared the absolute shit out of the corporate class. Many people have no idea about this Powell Memorandum, what it is, that it even exists. You could read it right now in black and white. Look it up. This was the reaction to the progressive strides that started in the 1960s and continued on into the 1970s. As I said, you could look this stuff up, but I just did this quick summary for my intro video to illustrate how important I think this is and how it connects to Project 2025. You'll see what I mean. So, what is the Powell Memorandum? Impact. The memo is considered influential in shaping modern conservative and pro-corporate political strategy, leading to increased corporate funding for political causes, the growth of think tanks and legal foundations, and efforts to influence public opinion through media and education. I mean, this is so sinister. Oy. The memo impact was to spur a strategic and aggressive campaign to use the courts, media, and universities to defend corporate interests against perceived government overreach and public criticism, a strategy that has been widely adopted by conservatives and has shaped legal and political discourse ever since. Sound familiar? Remember, this is 1971. There he is. Look at him all smiling and cheesing, putting on his new justice robe. He looks so cute. All right, so President Nixon nominated Lewis F. Powell Jr. to the U.S. Supreme Court in October 1971, 2 months after he wrote the Powell Memorandum. Lewis F. Powell was on multiple boards, corporate boards, including Philip Morris. Surprise anyone? Yeah. The memo serves as a call to arms for U.S. businesses to proactively counter critics like Ralph Nader and build an intellectual and legal infrastructure to defend capitalism. So, October 22nd, 1971, just 2 months after writing the memo, President Richard Nixon nominates Lewis Powell to the U.S. Supreme Court. The memo's existence and contents are not disclosed during the Senate confirmation hearings. Of course not. Why would they be? So, December 1971, Powell's nomination is confirmed by the Senate. 1972, Powell is sworn in as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Nice, nice. Okay, now this is where the shit starts to kick. September 28th, 29th, 1972. The memo is leaked to syndicated columnist Jack Anderson, who publishes articles describing it as a blueprint for an assault by big business on its critics, bringing it to public attention for the first time. 1973. Now, this is where your ears should start pricking up. The conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, is established, reportedly prompted by the memo's call for new institutions to advance conservative policies. The Pacific Legal Foundation, the PLF, one of the first conservative public interest law firms, is also founded around this time, following recommendations in the memo to fight in the courts. Look how tiny I had to make myself, but this is important. 1970s and beyond, the memo is credited with inspiring a coordinated long-term effort by corporate leaders and wealthy donors to establish a network of influential right-wing organizations, think tanks, and legal groups such as the American Legislative Exchange Council and the Cato Institute to shift public opinion, influence legislation, and impact judicial appointments. 1981. Many of the ideas championed by these new organizations, including substantial tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, are implemented during the Reagan administration, demonstrating the long-term impact of the movement the memo helped inspire. 1993. The memo regains prominence after being highlighted in a report by the Alliance for Justice, Justice for Sale, which traces the corporate funding of the legal movement. Present day, the memo continues to be cited as a significant factor in the rise of corporate power and influence in American politics and law, providing a historical context for current political and legal dynamics. I'm getting more and more pissed off with each slide, can you tell? Project 2025 is considered a modern application of the strategies outlined in the 1971 Powell Memorandum. Both documents are calls to action for the conservative movement and the business community to leverage their power to push back against progressive movements and entrench right-wing influence across American government and society. I am telling you guys, it is important to link to this. This document, the Powell Memorandum, was the godfather of all of the right-wing policies that have brought us to this point. Call to action. The Powell Memorandum was a confidential call for corporate America to aggressively use its wealth and influence to counter the perceived threat from consumer advocates, environmentalists, and other left-wing social movements. Project 2025 is a contemporary, detailed, 900-plus page how-to guide for a future Republican administration to dismantle the administrative state and implement a sweeping conservative agenda. They are linked. Institutional building. The Powell Memo provided the theoretical groundwork and inspiration for a network of conservative think tanks, foundations, and legal groups, such as the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. The Heritage Foundation is the primary institution behind the creation and publication of Project 2025's Mandate for Leadership series. Real quick before I go over the remaining slides, the reason why I think it is so important to connect the dots and start from the beginning, at least as far as I know, so far, this was the beginning of the corporate takeover of our country. It is very important to identify where these policies came from, because I do believe that the Democrats and the Republicans are both captured by corporatism, and they have been for decades. But we have to trace where these policies originated, because I feel there is much misinformation and people keep voting against their best interests. In my opinion, the Democratic Party is the lesser evil, because at least there are some things that the middle class gains when they are in control and progressive policies are implemented. There is always that Republican cockblock, though. That's what I call it, the Republican cockblock. Everything that we have and tried to advance is always blocked and thwarted by corporatism. Since the Powell Memorandum, the system really has been rigged. Congress, all of Congress, has deferred to corporate interests and given in to lobbyists over the interests of the people. Over and over and over again, we see this play out, no matter what the lip service is and what they tell us in order to get elected. And that is why I think starting here with my channel and starting to have these conversations to put the pieces together to really identify where these policies originated in order to be mindful and increase even more awareness of what their plan really is for the masses. Let me finish these up. I'm almost done. Focus on power concentration. what I was just talking about. A core goal of both documents is to consolidate and assert conservative power over key institutions. The Powell memo emphasized gaining sway over the courts, academia, and the media. Project 2025 focuses on concentrating power within the executive branch, removing the independence of the Justice Department and other agencies, and replacing many nonpartisan civil servants with politically loyal appointees in order to execute their objectives, of course. Protecting corporate interests, both frameworks champion free enterprise and aim to shield the business community from government oversight and environmental or consumer protection regulations. Project 2025 specifically proposes dismantling the Inflation Reduction Act and rolling back environmental protections. The Powell Memorandum laid out the philosophical and strategic blueprint for a long-term conservative counter-revolution, while Project 2025 represents the culmination of that effort, providing a detailed, ready-to-implement plan for a modern conservative administration. I also want to interject that the Reagan administration had their own version that connects the Powell Memorandum through to Project 2025, and they were able to execute and fulfill many of the objectives in that plan, but the inspiration was the Powell Memorandum from 1971. So here we are, the continuation, and still under that same paradigm, which is why I think it is so important to trace back and start from the beginning and pinpoint each time and whose policies it really was that has brought us to this point. Because this BS of fighting each other in the third estate and arguing who is better, Republicans or Democrats, they're all under the same umbrella. But the main culprits have been the right wing with these kinds of policies. And that is my whole point in connecting all of this stuff together, which is why I wanted to start here. And to go one further, speaking of connecting the dots, look at what else originated from the Nixon administration. Roger Ailes. Roger Ailes was a media consultant and advisor to Richard Nixon, and the initial concept for conservative news outlet was developed during his time with the Nixon administration. Nixon advisor Ailes was hired to manage Nixon's television appearances, starting with the 1968 presidential campaign, to improve the candidate's public image and bypass what they perceived as a hostile mainstream press. Of course, in 1970, a memo titled "A Plan for Putting the GOP on TV News" was circulated among Ailes and other Nixon aides. The document outlined a plot to create a pro-administration television network that would deliver Republican-friendly content directly to local TV stations, circumventing the existing network news prejudices. Prejudices? You mean journalism and telling the truth of your administration? Look at this. When I get all worked up, I start to get a hive. Anyway, precursor to Fox. Although a 24-hour cable news network was not feasible in the 1970s, the memo's concept directly mirrored the future mission of Fox News. The actual Fox News channel was not launched until 1996 when Rupert Murdoch, we all know him, hired Ailes to be its founding CEO, and there's that connection. The network was built on the decades-old idea of providing a conservative alternative to what Ailes and many conservatives viewed as liberal-leaning news organizations. Again, journalists reporting on the truth of the shenanigans in your administration. What is also tied to all of this is the Republican talk radio and the capture of the AM radio stations that was also strategically done by the right wing. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, all of these people that ended up with radio shows. Although Sean Hannity, was he ever on the radio? Rush Limbaugh for sure. And the other right-wing pundits that their names escape me, but Rush is right at the top. I mean, he was the kingpin back then. The point is the interjection of this propaganda and how strategic and effective the right wing has been. And the misinformation and disinformation that they have been able to permeate through our society to the point where no one even knows what the truth is anymore. And this is my whole goal with my YouTube channel, that I hope to accomplish and to grow a community with you guys. So of course, like and subscribe and share this video. I am going to be posting a lot more on here, different topics, but the theme is always going to be how we in the third estate, the bottom 90%, are going to unite. I will have my link tree down in the description. I have a TikTok and also a Substack, which I am very active on Substack, do a lot of live streams, which I am going to be posting here on my YouTube channel as well. I can transfer them over because I usually do multi-guest live streams and panels. I have a Substack partner. We also do lives and discussions, political discussions, and I would love for you to take a look at those and give me feedback and let me know what you think as well. It is nice to meet you. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Let me know what you think. If you've heard of the Powell Memorandum, I really want to put this on the map because this, to me, is the linchpin and the backbone of the conservative movement, how they have been able to accomplish what they have accomplished so far. Social media, I believe, has been a blessing and a curse. But the blessing has been that we get to talk to each other and we get to connect with each other and compare notes and get educated. And I really believe we have to do this like on the fast track now. So stay tuned. I will be back with another video soon.